The rain was cold that evening. Not the kind that gently kissed your skin. This one slapped like punishment from the sky. I stood there shivering, one hand gripping my little sister's shoulder, the other clutching the handle of a half-torn suitcase. Inside, everything we had left. 3 dresses, a family photo, and a crumpled hospital receipt that mocked me with unpaid bills. The heavy click of the door echoed behind us. That sound, that one single sound, burned into my chest like fire. It was my brother, Daniel. He stood on the porch of our father's house, his wife beside him in her designer coat, the golden porch light framing their silhouettes like something out of a nightmare. "Lily, I told you to leave before dark," he said flatly. "Dad's gone. Mom's gone. This place is mine now. Go find somewhere else." I stared at him, my throat burning, rain dripping down my face, or maybe those were tears. "Daniel, please. Ellie's sick. She's burning up. She needs a doctor." He didn't even let me finish. His eyes were empty. "That's not my problem anymore." The door shut again. Just like that. The sound of the lock sliding into place was louder than thunder. Beside me, my younger brother Mason muttered, "What are we gonna do now, Lil?" I looked at the street, dark, endless, merciless, and said the only thing I could: "We survive." And in that moment, standing barefoot on that soaked driveway, I realized something that changed me forever. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's betrayal wearing your brother's face. If grief had a sound, it would be the static hum of that news broadcast. I still remember the moment time froze. The TV flickered in our living room, the soft glow bouncing off the family portraits on the wall. Mom stood frozen by the counter, her hands still clutching the dish towel she'd been using to dry the dinner plates. Mason was sprawled on the floor doing his math homework. Ellie was painting, tiny hands smudged with color, humming to herself. Then the words came. "Breaking news. A private helicopter has crashed into the Hudson River. Officials confirm 5 passengers were on board, including prominent businessman, Mr. Jonathan Wells." Mom's towel fell. The glass she'd been holding slipped and shattered against the tile. I don't remember screaming, but the neighbors said later they heard us. Heard the echo of a family breaking in half. 2 days later, they found his body. The authorities said it was quick, that he wouldn't have felt a thing. But that didn't stop the nightmares. The newspapers ran the story for weeks. Philanthropist and entrepreneur dies in tragic crash. They showed his photo, smiling, confident, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to my graduation. I wanted to believe he'd somehow survived, that maybe he'd wake up and walk through the door again. But life isn't a movie. Sometimes, hope just stops breathing. The funeral was a blur. Rain poured again, as if the heavens themselves couldn't hold back their tears. Daniel stood tall, stoic, shaking hands with business associates, acting like the man of the house already. I noticed the way he avoided eye contact when the will was mentioned. Even then, something about his silence felt wrong. After the guests left, I found him in Dad's study, sitting in Dad's chair, staring at the empty leather seat across from him. He didn't look up when I entered. "Dan," I whispered, "are you okay?" He exhaled slowly. "Do I look okay, Lily? Dad's gone. Somebody has to keep this family running." I nodded, though his tone made my stomach twist. "Mom's not herself," I said softly. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday. Maybe you can talk to her." His jaw tightened. "Mom's always been emotional. She'll get over it. What I need is access to Dad's accounts. The company can't run itself." Something about the way he said it, so cold, so businesslike, made the air heavy. Dad's death wasn't even a week old, and already, Daniel sounded more like a CEO than a son. That night, I went to Mom's room. She was sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness. Her wedding ring glittered faintly in the moonlight. "Mom," I whispered. She didn't turn. He promised he'd be back by Sunday. He always kept his word. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled. I sat beside her, resting my head on her shoulder. "We'll be okay, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. But deep down, something inside me already knew we wouldn't be. 2 weeks later, Daniel announced he was taking over Dad's company. He moved fast. Too fast. Bank papers, documents, transfers. He told us he was protecting family assets. But I noticed he never said whose family. Then one morning, as the sun rose pink and cold, Mason came running into my room. "Lily, come quick. It's Mom." I found her on the living room floor, eyes wide open, one hand clutching her chest, the other reaching toward Dad's photo on the wall. The doctors called it a heart attack. I called it heartbreak. At the burial, Daniel didn't shed a tear. He stood by the grave, hands in pockets, sunglasses hiding whatever he didn't want us to see. After everyone left, I stayed back. I ran my fingers across the fresh dirt and whispered, "I'll take care of them, Mom. I promise." Behind me, I heard Daniel's voice, calm, detached. "You can stop pretending you're the responsible one now, Lily. You've done enough crying for all of us." I turned to face him, tears stinging my eyes. "What's wrong with you, Daniel? Dad just died. Mom's gone. Don't you feel anything?" He smiled, just a faint, twisted smile. "Feelings don't pay the bills. I've got plans to make." That was the moment I saw it, the flicker of greed in his eyes. The man who used to tuck me in as a child was gone. In his place stood someone I didn't recognize. The storm that took our father was nothing compared to the one Daniel was about to unleash. The house felt different after Mom's funeral. Quieter, heavier. Even the walls seemed to echo differently, like they were mourning too. Mom used to fill every morning with sound. The gentle hum of her gospel playlist, the clinking of mugs, the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the hallways. But now, silence ruled everything. Sometimes, I caught Mason staring at her empty chair during breakfast. Ellie, only 9, started sleeping in my room again. She said she kept dreaming about Mom calling her name. I tried to stay strong, tried to be the adult. But at night, when they were asleep, I'd go into the living room, sit by the photo shelf, and cry silently into the dark. Daniel barely came home. When he did, he was always on the phone, pacing through the hall, talking in clipped sentences about shares, investors, transfers. One morning, I overheard him talking to a man I didn't know. "I'm the legal heir," he said sharply. "My father's will gives me full control. The others, they're dependents. I'll handle them. Handle us." That word stuck in my head like a thorn. Later that night, I confronted him in the kitchen. He was sipping whiskey, scrolling through his tablet. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I overheard you today. What did you mean by that?" He didn't look up. "You shouldn't eavesdrop, Lily. It's rude." "Don't play games with me," I snapped. "You said Dad's will gave you full control." "That's not true. He left everything for the family. For us." Finally, he looked at me. His eyes were cold, steady. "You're too young to understand business, Lily. I'm making sure Dad's company survives." "You're lying," I said, voice trembling. "You're selling things off, aren't you?" He smiled, slow and cruel. "You always were the emotional one. Do yourself a favor. Stay out of things you can't handle." Then he walked past me, brushing my shoulder just enough to make me feel small. A few weeks later, I noticed strange cars parked by the gate. Men in suits came and went with documents. That's when I realized Daniel wasn't saving the company. He was selling it, piece by piece. Mason found out too. He burst into my room one night, fists clenched. "He sold Dad's warehouse, Lily." I saw the paperwork on his desk. What are we supposed to live on? I didn't know what to say. I felt helpless, powerless against Daniel's calculated cruelty. The turning point came one cold December morning. Daniel called a family meeting. He was wearing a new watch, gold and heavy. His wife sat beside him, tapping her nails against the armrest impatiently. "I've decided," he said. "We're selling the house." Mason stood up immediately. "You're what?" "It's too big for us. The upkeep is expensive. Besides, I've got a new property uptown. You can all make your own arrangements." "You mean you're kicking us out?" I whispered. He shrugged. "Call it whatever you want. You'll thank me later." Ellie began to cry. Mason's face turned red with rage. I tried to reason with him, begged him, but Daniel had already made up his mind. That night, movers came. By morning, half the furniture was gone. We moved into a small apartment downtown, using what little money Mom had left in her account. It wasn't much, but at least it was ours, for a while. I started working at a diner after school, just to cover groceries. Mason picked up shifts at a gas station. Ellie's cough got worse in the cold, but we couldn't afford a doctor. One evening, as I walked home from work, I saw a news clip on a store TV. Daniel smiling at a gala, shaking hands with the governor. The caption read, "Jonathan Wells Group expands to global markets under new leadership." My chest burned. He was living large, on the ruins of our lives. Then came the eviction notice. Apparently, the rent hadn't been paid in 2 months. I'd given Mason the cash to drop off, but the landlord claimed he never received it. That's when I realized Daniel had been intercepting the payments. He wanted us gone. Completely. When the landlord came that night, he didn't even wait for us to pack properly. Rain started again, just like that first night. We stood outside, holding our bags, watching the only shelter we had disappear behind a locked door. That's when Ellie collapsed, coughing violently, her body burning with fever. Mason caught her before she hit the ground. "Lily! She's not breathing right." I fell to my knees, panic flooding me. We had no car, no insurance, no money. And Daniel, the one person who could save her, wouldn't even pick up my calls. I left 15 messages that night. He never replied. The next morning, I saw a photo of him on social media, lounging by a pool in Dubai, smiling with his family. That's when something in me finally snapped. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I was going to fight. And I didn't know it yet, but help was already on the way, from someone who knew more about my father's legacy than I ever could. The rain came early that morning, pounding the cracked window panes like angry fists. Ellie's breathing was shallow. Every inhale sounded like it scraped against her ribs. I sat beside her on the floor of the small apartment we'd been forced to rent, pressing a damp cloth against her forehead. Mason was pacing near the door, hands trembling, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat. "We need to take her to a hospital," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were terrified. I nodded weakly. "I know. But the last clinic turned us away. We still owe them from last week." The door suddenly banged open. It was Mr. Graham, the landlord. His shirt was soaked, his face twisted with irritation. "I told you people yesterday," he barked. "If the rent isn't paid, you're out." I stood quickly. "Please, sir. Just give us 2 more days." "No more days," he snapped. "You're 3 months behind. I'm done waiting." He turned and motioned toward 2 men behind him. They started hauling out our few belongings, bags, boxes, even Ellie's blanket. "Stop!" Mason shouted, pushing one of them back. But the man shoved him hard against the wall. "Don't make it worse," the landlord warned coldly. I grabbed Ellie in my arms as the rain blew in through the open door, soaking us all. She whimpered weakly, her lips pale. Sir, please, I begged. My sister's sick. We'll leave as soon as she's better. He didn't even look at me. Not my problem. And then it happened. The sound I'll never forget. Click. The door slammed shut, the lock turned, and just like that, we were out. We stood under the leaking awning, watching as our meager belongings got drenched. The street lights flickered. Cars rushed past, their headlights slicing through the mist. Mason kicked at the curb in frustration. That bastard Daniel. He did this, Lily. He's behind all of this. I swallowed hard, clutching Ellie close. I know. Then let's go to him, he said. Right now. We'll make him see what he's done. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew it would be useless. Daniel didn't see us as family anymore. He saw us as obstacles. Still, desperation can make you foolish. We found his number on an old text thread and called again. He answered this time. Daniel, it's me, I said, my voice shaking. Please. Ellie's really sick. We need help. Just this once. Silence. Then a soft laugh. Lily, he said, almost kindly. You made your choices. You wanted to handle things your way, remember? Now deal with it. Daniel. He hung up. Just like that. Mason punched a lamppost so hard his knuckles split. I couldn't even cry anymore. My tears were dry, my throat numb. Hours later, we found ourselves sitting under a bridge, huddled beneath a torn tarp that smelled of damp wood and rot. Ellie's fever had climbed higher. She was delirious, whispering things that didn't make sense. I held her close, whispering, You'll be okay, baby. Just hold on. That's when I saw headlights. A black sedan pulled up near the curb. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out, holding an umbrella. His face was partly hidden in the rain, but something about his posture, calm, purposeful, felt strange. He looked around, then walked toward us. Lily Wells? He asked. His voice was deep, steady. I froze. Who are you? He knelt down, his coat brushing against the puddles. My name is Richard Carter. I was your father's business partner. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mason stood, defensive. What do you want? He ignored the question, eyes fixed on me. Your father and I built Wells Carter Industries together. I've been overseas managing our foreign branch. I only just heard about his death, and everything that's happened since. My throat tightened. Then you know Daniel took everything. His jaw clenched. I do. And that's why I'm here. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder, old, weathered, sealed with wax. Your father left this in our corporate archives. It names all his legal heirs, and specifies that his shares cannot be transferred without unanimous consent from all children. I blinked, stunned. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, your brother's been committing fraud. The sound of rain faded in my ears as his words sank in. Fraud. Daniel. It all made sense now. The rush to take control, the secrecy, the sudden eviction. Mr. Carter continued, Your father trusted me to protect his legacy if anything happened to him. I didn't know it would come to this, but I intend to honor that promise. He handed me a business card. Come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll help you get back what's yours. Then, as he turned to leave, he paused. Bring your siblings. You're going to need witnesses. He walked back to his car, disappearing into the rain, leaving us staring after him, soaked, shivering, but for the first time in months, hopeful. Mason looked at me, wide-eyed. Lily, do you think he's serious? I looked down at the folder in my hands, the wax seal glistening under the streetlight. Yes, I whispered. I think Dad just sent us an angel. Morning came gray and wet. The city was still dripping from the night storm when we stepped off the bus in front of Carter and Wells Holdings. The building was tall, glass and steel, but to me, it looked like hope itself. I clutched Ellie's hand tightly while Mason carried the folder Mr. Carter had given us. "Are you sure about this?" Mason asked, scanning the polished lobby with suspicion. "No," I said softly. "But I'm sure about one thing. Dad wouldn't have wanted us to live like beggars." We were escorted upstairs by a receptionist who seemed to already know who we were. The elevator chimed softly, opening into a wide office filled with light. And there he was, Mr. Richard Carter, standing by a wall of glass, overlooking the city like a man who carried the weight of both guilt and responsibility. He turned and smiled faintly. "Lily, Mason, Ellie, come in." His voice had authority, but also kindness, the kind of calm confidence you only hear in men who've seen too much and survived it. We sat across from him. He poured coffee for Mason and me, warm milk for Ellie. On the desk lay stacks of files, neatly arranged, with yellow tabs sticking out of the sides. "I went through your father's records last night," he began. "Jonathan was more meticulous than anyone I've ever known. He kept duplicates of every major document, and I found something Daniel probably hoped would stay buried." He opened a folder and slid it toward me. It was a copy of Dad's last will and testament. My hands trembled as I read the first few lines. "To my children, Daniel, Lily, Mason, and Ellie, I leave not just my assets, but my legacy. My shares, properties, and company holdings are to be managed jointly until my youngest child reaches the age of 25. I looked up, my voice barely a whisper. "Jointly." Carter nodded. "That means Daniel couldn't have transferred those shares legally without your consent. He forged signatures. Multiple ones. We have proof." Mason clenched his fists. "So he stole from us, from his own blood." Carter sighed. "I'm afraid so. He used his position to liquidate company assets, reroute funds, and cover his tracks. But there's something else." He reached for another file, this one sealed with a corporate stamp. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. The ink slightly faded. "It's from your father," Carter said quietly. I took the letter and unfolded it slowly. The familiar handwriting made my eyes sting. "If you are reading this, my dear children, it means I am no longer there to guide you. Life can be cruel, and people, even those closest to us, can lose their way. But truth has a strange way of returning home. Trust it. Trust each other. And if ever things fall apart, go to Richard. He will know what to do." My hands shook as I finished reading. Mason wiped his eyes roughly. Ellie, too young to understand, just leaned against me, whispering, "Daddy's handwriting." Mr. Carter leaned forward, his expression solemn. "I promised your father I would protect his family. Daniel's greed has gone too far. But if we act carefully, we can take everything back, legally, cleanly, and publicly." Mason frowned. "How?" Carter pressed a button on his desk. A woman entered, holding a folder thicker than a dictionary. "This," he said, tapping it, "is the evidence. Bank transfers, email correspondence, false filings, and witness statements. Enough to bury Daniel in court, or at least force a full investigation." He looked at me directly. "But this has to come from you, Lily. You're the moral center of this family now. If you stand firm, the law and the media will follow." I swallowed hard. "You think people will believe us?" He gave a small smile. "They won't need to believe. They'll see." 2 days later, we met with the family's lawyer, Mr. Hawkins, the same man who had handled Dad's estate. When he saw the documents, his eyes went wide. "I had no idea Daniel had done all this," he said, shaking his head. "He manipulated me, used falsified court orders. This is criminal. Then let's make it right, I said. He nodded grimly. It's time to file for a full injunction and asset freeze. But I warn you, Daniel won't go down quietly. He didn't. The moment the papers were served, the storm hit. Daniel called me, the first time in months. His voice was venomous. You ungrateful brat, he hissed. You think you can destroy me? You're a child playing in a world you don't understand. No, I said calmly. I understand perfectly now. You stole from your own family. You stole Dad's legacy. He laughed coldly. You'll regret this. I already did, I said. Every day I believed you still had a heart. Then I hung up. The lawsuit exploded in the media within 48 hours. Business Heir accused of fraud and family exploitation, screamed the headlines. Talk shows debated it. Social media burned with outrage. Carter shielded us from most of the noise, but I saw one clip. Daniel storming out of court, cameras flashing, his once perfect composure cracking. For the first time, he looked small. Weeks passed. The legal battle dragged on, but truth has a way of wearing people down. Under pressure, Daniel's associates began to talk. Bank records surfaced. Signatures were proven fake. Finally, the court ruled. All assets belonging to Jonathan Wells' estate are to be returned to his rightful heirs, Lily, Mason, and Ellie Wells. Mr. Daniel Wells is found guilty of fraudulent misrepresentation and embezzlement. The gavel struck. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing for what felt like the first time in years. Mr. Carter placed a hand on my shoulder. Your father would be proud. I looked at him, this man who'd stepped out of the rain like a ghost from Dad's past, and said, You didn't just save us. You gave us back our name. He smiled gently. Your father once told me something. Money fades, but integrity echoes. Don't lose that, Lily. Ever. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds. Mason threw his arm around me. Ellie giggled for the first time since Mom died. And somewhere deep inside, I knew, justice had finally come full circle. But Daniel wasn't finished yet. As we walked toward Carter's car, Mason's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it and froze. Lily, it's from Daniel. I took the phone. The message was short. You think it's over? It's only just begun. The screen went dark. The first thing I remember about that morning was the silence. The kind of silence that usually follows a storm. Except this time, we were the storm. 3 weeks after Mr. Turner, my father's former business partner, reappeared in our lives, everything had changed. He had the sort of presence that made people listen without saying much. His calm eyes hid a sharp mind that had built empires, fought boardroom battles, and knew exactly where to strike when it mattered. When he first came, I thought he was just being kind, helping us out of pity. But when he handed me a file one evening, I realized this was far bigger than charity. Your father, he said, owned 40% of Titan Aero Logistics. He was never just an employee, he was a co-founder. And your brother forged documents to claim full ownership after your parents died. I felt my stomach tighten. The words hit me like ice water. He, what? Mr. Turner leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. Your father trusted him with the documents after the crash, and he used that trust to steal everything. But don't worry, Lily, we're going to take it all back. The next few days blurred into strategy meetings, phone calls, and long drives to Manhattan. Mr. Turner connected us with his legal team, people who had fought and won cases that made national headlines. When the lawyers gathered around the table, I almost couldn't speak. I wasn't used to sitting in rooms like this, rooms where every word could change your fate. One of the attorneys, a woman named Ms. Alvarez, opened the folder and sighed. Your brothers made a mess. He's transferred most of the assets under a shell company, bought real estate under false trusts, and bribed a few insiders to stay quiet. But he made one mistake. He underestimated your father's partner. Turner smiled faintly. He always did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father, his laughter at the dinner table, the smell of his cologne, the way he always said, "Integrity isn't optional, Lily, it's who you are when no one's watching." I wondered what he would say if he knew his own son had betrayed everything he stood for. The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. The papers hit the headlines before we could blink. Family feud over Titan Aero Logistics fortune. Reporters camped outside our temporary apartment. Journalists dug up our family photos. The media turned our pain into headlines. When I saw my brother's face on the TV, smiling smugly as he told reporters it was all a misunderstanding, something broke in me. I walked out of the living room and slammed the door. "He's lying," I said through tears. "He's lying and no one's stopping him." Mr. Turner looked at me quietly. "They will," he said. "Justice takes time, Lily, but truth doesn't lose power just because someone buries it." Still, waiting was agony. Days became weeks. Each court session revealed new layers of deceit, fake documents, hidden accounts, offshore investments. And every time I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Until one afternoon, during cross-examination, everything changed. My brother was on the stand. He was confident, arrogant even, speaking as though he was the only person who ever mattered. But then, Ms. Alvarez played an audio recording. It was my father's voice. A message he had left for Mr. Turner just a week before the crash. "Tom, if anything ever happens to me, please make sure Lily and the kids are safe. I'm updating the equity documents this week. Daniel will keep them in the home safe. He's responsible enough to." He stopped mid-sentence as the recording cut off. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face went pale. The judge leaned forward. "Is this your father's voice?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Why, yes." "And did you keep those documents as he instructed?" He hesitated. I don't recall." Ms. Alvarez slid another paper forward. "Then perhaps this will help you remember. The notarized record of transfer you forged 2 weeks after your father's funeral." Daniel's lawyer whispered something, but it was too late. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed. And for the first time my brother, the man who had destroyed our lives, looked afraid. That night, when we got home, I sat by the window and watched the city lights blur through the rain. Mr. Turner walked in quietly and handed me a cup of tea. "You did well today," he said. "Your father would be proud." Tears burned my eyes. I don't understand how he could do that to us. His own family. Turner looked away, his jaw tight. "Money doesn't change people, Lily, it reveals them." He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "Tomorrow will be tough. But we're close. Don't lose faith now." And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The day of the verdict felt heavier than any other day. The sky hung gray over the courthouse, as if the clouds themselves were holding their breath. I sat in the front row beside Mr. Turner and Ms. Alvarez, hands trembling in my lap. My siblings were behind me, quiet, tense, barely blinking. It had been 6 exhausting months of legal battles, accusations, and sleepless nights. 6 months since the day we decided to fight back. And now it all came down to this. Across the courtroom, Daniel, my brother, looked different. The arrogance was gone. His once perfect suit seemed too big on him now, like even his pride had shrunk. He kept glancing toward his lawyer, but no one was looking at him anymore. The judge entered, and the entire room rose. My heart pounded as the bailiff called for silence. In the matter of Lily Carter et al. Versus Daniel Carter, regarding the fraudulent acquisition of Titan Aero Logistics assets. The words blurred in my head. I felt my pulse in my throat. Ms. Alvarez gave my hand a firm squeeze under the table. We find in favor of the plaintiffs. It took a full 3 seconds for the words to register. Then it hit me, we won. My breath broke into a sob I couldn't contain. My little sister clutched me from behind, crying into my shoulder. My younger brother, Ethan, whispered, "We did it. We actually did it." But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, he continued, the court orders the immediate restitution of all misappropriated assets, including financial accounts, real estate, and company shares, to the legal heirs of the late Richard Carter. Mr. Daniel Carter is also found guilty of falsifying legal documents and obstruction of justice. Daniel's lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, whispering frantically. Daniel stood, shaking his head. "No, this isn't fair. I'm family. That company was supposed to be mine." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Sit down, Mr. Carter. You've said enough." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as cameras clicked. The sound of my brother's outburst echoed in my chest, not as anger anymore, but sadness. Because deep down, I knew he had lost something far more valuable than any company, his soul. Outside the courthouse, the cold air hit like a cleansing wave. Reporters surrounded us instantly. "Lily, how does it feel to win? What's next for you and your family? Do you plan to return to Titan Aero Logistics?" I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. Instead, I turned to Mr. Turner, the man who had stood by us like a guardian angel, and whispered, "It's over." He smiled softly. "Not quite. The verdict is just the beginning, Lily. What you do next, that's what defines your father's legacy." He was right. Winning the case wasn't the end. It was a second chance. A chance to rebuild, to honor my parents, to turn pain into purpose. 2 weeks later, I stood in the boardroom of Titan Aero Logistics. The walls that once felt distant and powerful now felt familiar. A portrait of my father hung near the entrance, his smile, calm and confident, watching over us again. Mr. Turner had insisted I take his seat as co-owner. "Your father would have wanted it this way," he said. "You're your father's daughter, strong, fair, and unshakable." The first board meeting was quiet at first. The directors waited for me to speak. My hands were steady this time. "This company was built on trust," I said. "And for too long, that trust was broken. But from today, Titan Aero Logistics stands for something new, not greed, not power, but integrity." They applauded. Not loudly, but sincerely. For the first time since my father's death, I felt peace. That evening, I visited my parents' graves. I brought 2 white roses and knelt between their headstones. "We made it, Dad. Mom, we're okay now. It wasn't easy, but we're going to rebuild, together." The wind picked up softly, brushing my hair across my face. For a brief moment, I felt warmth, like a silent nod from somewhere beyond. I smiled through my tears. "You always said integrity would lead us home," I whispered. "And you were right." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Unknown, congratulations, Lily. Your father would be proud. But you should know, Daniel wasn't working alone." I froze. The world around me seemed to tilt slightly, the peace I'd just found slipping through my fingers. Who could it be? Another betrayal? Another secret waiting to surface? I looked back at my parents' graves, heart pounding again. No, this wasn't over. Not yet.